The Quantum Whisperer. Chapter 1, The First Connection. The dimly lit laboratory buzzed with anticipation. Dr. Amelia Monroe stood at the center of the room, a visionary scientist in her mid-40s, her eyes sparkling with excitement and a hint of trepidation. Before her lay the culmination of years of tireless research, the Quantum Whisperer, a device she had designed to bridge the gap between the living and the afterlife. A hushed crowd had gathered, a mix of skeptics and believers, all drawn by the allure of speaking to the departed. Among them was the Mitchell family, their faces etched with grief. They had lost their daughter, Sarah, in a tragic accident. Amelia understood their pain, for she, too, had lost someone dear, her husband, in a car crash years ago. Today, Amelia began, her voice quivering with emotion, we embark on an extraordinary journey. With this device, we shall attempt to communicate with the other side, to reach out to those who have crossed the threshold of life and death. The Quantum Whisperer was an intricate machine, web of wires and quantum processors, mysterious blue and green lights casting eerie glows on the room's walls. It was a gateway to the unknown, a bridge to a realm beyond human comprehension. As the Mitchell family took their places, a palpable tension filled the room. The mournful faces of the family members displayed a mixture of hope, doubt, and fear. They grasped each other's hands, seeking solace in one another. Amelia initiated the machine, and a soft hum resonated through the laboratory. The room fell silent as the Quantum Whisperer's screens displayed intricate patterns of light, a visualization of the quantum entanglement it was creating. Is anyone there? Amelia's voice trembled as she addressed the empty room. A faint breeze rustled the papers on the table. Then, a whisper, so faint it could have been a trick of the mind, echoed in the chamber. The hairs on Amelia's arms stood on end. Sarah. Mrs. Mitchell, her eyes filled with tears, asked, her voice trembling. Another soft whisper, and the room seemed to quiver with energy. It was as though the very fabric of reality was thinning, allowing glimpses of an unseen world. I'm here, Mom, the voice replied, unmistakably Sarah's. The Mitchell family gasped in disbelief. Amelia watched in awe as the Quantum Whisperer had achieved the impossible. It had connected the living with the deceased. Tears of joy and sorrow mixed in the room as Sarah spoke of her experiences on the other side. She described a world of brilliant light, a place where she felt no pain, only pure love and peace. Her words brought solace to her family, tears of grief turning into tears of catharsis. But amid the tears of joy, a shadow began to creep over the room. The blue and green lights of the Quantum Whisperer started to flicker erratically. The temperature in the chamber dropped, and a cold wind swept through the room. What's happening? Mr. Mitchell asked, his voice tinged with worry. The atmosphere grew oppressive, and a dark presence loomed. Amelia, the smile fading from her face, knew that they had not journeyed alone into the afterlife. The malevolent entity, unbeknownst to anyone, had crossed over, attracted by the connection the Quantum Whisperer had created. As the entity's cold fingers caressed the room, it whispered one final chilling word, stay. The Quantum Whisperer's lights went out, and the chamber was plunged into darkness. In the silence, a low, ominous hum resonated from the shadows, a haunting reminder that not all who returned from the afterlife were benevolent. The living had unwittingly invited a relentless and malevolent entity into their world, and it would not be so easily banished. Chapter 2, The Unwanted Guest. The laboratory remained in utter darkness, save for the occasional flicker of emergency lights. A sense of foreboding weighed heavily on the room, the atmosphere thick with uncertainty. The Quantum Whisperer, once a source of wonder, had become an enigmatic gateway through which an unforeseen malevolence had slipped. Amelia's team fumbled for flashlights, their beams cutting through the obscurity, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Panic swirled through the room, and the Mitchell family clung to one another, their faces etched with fear. "Is everyone okay?" Amelia's voice, laced with trepidation, pierced the gloom. She held a flashlight in one hand and the Quantum Whisperer's manual in the other, frantically trying to determine what had gone wrong. A shiver ran down her spine as a whisper, barely audible, emanated from the shadows. It was a sibilant, haunting voice that seemed to echo from the beyond. "Amelia," the voice hissed, low and guttural, as if it belonged to a being that had long forgotten the warmth of the living. Amelia turned toward the voice, her flashlight beam trembling, and saw nothing but the vacant laboratory. The entity, if it could be called that, remained hidden, a presence lurking in the unseen, its intent unknown. Amelia's team gathered in a defensive huddle around the Mitchell family, who had fallen into a trembling silence. The air grew colder, and an invisible hand seemed to tug at the very essence of their existence, filling them with dread. One of the team members, David, a skeptic who had initially regarded the Quantum Whisperer as an elaborate hoax, spoke up, his voice a blend of fear and defiance. "We should leave. This is getting too dangerous." Amelia nodded, acknowledging the gravity of the situation. She attempted to power down the Quantum Whisperer, but the controls remained unresponsive. It was as if the entity itself had taken control, an ominous presence that had slipped into the heart of their invention. As the minutes passed, the entity's whispers grew louder, its words indecipherable, but the intent unmistakable, malevolent. Shadows danced on the laboratory walls, contorting into grotesque forms, as though the entity was mocking the feeble attempts of the living to defy it. Then, an abrupt silence fell over the room. The team's flashlights dimmed, leaving only the faint glow of the emergency lights. The Quantum Whisperer's screens blinked to life, displaying a strange, swirling vortex, a tear in the fabric of reality. From within the vortex, a pair of unseeing, malevolent eyes peered out, unblinking. The room seemed to lose all sense of time and place as the vortex expanded, threatening to engulf everything. The Quantum Whisperer had become a conduit not only to the afterlife but also to a realm where the laws of physics and reality no longer held sway. Amelia, her scientific curiosity warring with her dread, realized that the entity's power was beyond their control. They were trespassers in a realm they could not comprehend, and the entity was the guardian of this forbidden territory. With a last, desperate effort, she reached for the Quantum Whisperer, attempting to sever its connection to the other side. But as her fingers brushed the machine, a shock of icy pain surged through her, causing her to recoil in agony. "Amelia!" David cried out, but it was too late. The entity had claimed her as a conduit, a link between their world and the enigmatic realm it inhabited. Amelia's consciousness spiraled into a void, where the boundaries between the living and the afterlife blurred. She was both scientist and spectral entity, trapped in a relentless dance of existence and non-existence, as the Quantum Whisperer continued to churn with dark energy, drawing them all deeper into an unknown abyss. Chapter 3: The Entity's Demands. In the unsettling void between dimensions, Amelia's senses were fragmented and distorted. She felt herself being pulled in multiple directions simultaneously, as if existing in a fractured dream. Her very essence was inextricably linked with the malevolent entity that had invaded their world. Back in the darkened laboratory, the atmosphere remained tense and electric. The team had managed to cut the power to the Quantum Whisperer, rendering the machine inert, but they were acutely aware that their problems were far from resolved. With Amelia's disappearance, her team had been thrust into a state of disarray. Anxiety and uncertainty clung to them like a shadow, a reminder of the malevolent presence that still lingered. David, who had been skeptical at the outset, now bore the weight of his disbelief like a heavy chain. "I should have never agreed to this," he muttered, casting a wary glance at the lifeless Quantum Whisperer. "We're in way over our heads." Others in the team shared his sentiments, yet there was a consensus that they couldn't simply abandon Amelia. Her groundbreaking work and her connection to the entity meant they had a responsibility to confront this unprecedented threat. The Mitchell family, shaken and traumatized, clung to each other, their faith in the Quantum Whisperer's initial promise shattered. Mrs. Mitchell whispered to her husband, "We should have never tampered with the afterlife. This is a punishment for our hubris." As the hours passed, the team worked diligently to decipher the Quantum Whisperer's logs and recordings, searching for clues that might lead to Amelia's whereabouts. It became increasingly evident that the entity that had attached itself to the machine was anything but passive. It had not only breached their world but also infiltrated the inner workings of the Quantum Whisperer, rendering it a vessel for its inscrutable power. Within the void, Amelia's perception was fragmented, a kaleidoscope of sensations and memories. She found herself surrounded by shifting, ethereal landscapes, like a lucid dream unraveling. She was not alone. The malevolent entity, a spectral presence, lingered on the periphery of her consciousness, its presence an ever-present source of disquiet. "Who are you?" Amelia demanded, her voice echoing through the inky void. The entity's response was a dissonant symphony of voices, an unsettling chorus of the deceased, all echoing their despair and longing. "I am many, yet I am one. I am the hunger for life, the thirst for existence. I am the forgotten and the forsaken." Amelia's struggle to grasp the entity's nature and motivations continued, as the boundaries between her own thoughts and those of the entity blurred. She realized that the entity's power was intertwined with her own, a disconcerting realization that left her feeling like a puppet on the strings of an unseen force. Back in the laboratory, the team uncovered unsettling details about the entity from the Quantum Whisperer's logs. It was a malevolent presence, drawn to the Quantum Whisperer by its promise of connection to the living. The entity sought passage into their world, yearning for a return to life, regardless of the consequences. As they pieced together fragments of information, they realized that the entity had demands that seemed impossible to fulfill. It wanted access to the world of the living, promising to reveal long-buried secrets from the afterlife in exchange. But the conditions it set were ominous, suggesting that the entity had no intention of playing by the rules of the living. With a sense of foreboding, the team discussed the entity's demands. They knew that Amelia's connection with the entity made her a vital link in the chain, and her very existence was tethered to the entity's whims. As night descended upon the laboratory, shrouding it in darkness, the team was faced with a grim choice: to confront the malevolent entity and the demands it presented, or to succumb to a fate defined by the relentless hunger for life that lurked within the shadows of the Quantum Whisperer. Their battle with an entity that defied the boundaries of life and death had only just begun, and the consequences of their choices would shape the fate of their world. Chapter 4: Haunting Visions. The laboratory was cloaked in the uneasy stillness of the night. A subtle chill hung in the air, serving as a constant reminder of the spectral entity's presence, both in the room and in the recesses of Amelia's fractured consciousness. In the void, Amelia's perception continued to waver between clarity and distortion. She was locked in an unsettling dance with the entity, whose form seemed ever shifting, its identity a maddening enigma. Her own thoughts and memories melded with the entity's, creating a nightmarish tapestry of emotions and experiences. "Who are you really?" Amelia demanded, frustration tinging her voice. The entity responded with a mixture of voices that were not its own but borrowed from the countless souls it had encountered in its timeless existence. "I am the echoes of unfulfilled dreams, the torment of those abandoned in the dark, and the insatiable yearning for life." As the entity spoke, a parade of spectral visions unfolded before Amelia's eyes. She bore witness to fragmented memories of people from different eras and places, their faces contorted in anguish and longing. The Quantum Whisperer, still dormant in the laboratory, remained a source of curiosity and dread. The team was piecing together the entity's demands, attempting to discern a pattern or motive in the fragments of information they had uncovered. The entity wanted access to the world of the living, a chance to bridge the gap between life and death. But what lay on the other side of that bridge was a mystery. A sense of dread weighed heavily on the room. The team was acutely aware that their understanding of the entity's true nature remained limited, and any pact with such a malevolent force carried immense risk. The Quantum Whisperer, a device born of scientific ambition, had unwittingly become a gateway to an unpredictable and potentially calamitous realm. The Mitchell family, still reeling from their initial encounter with the entity, had come to accept the magnitude of their predicament. They clung to each other for support, their vulnerability drawing them closer. Their desire to reach Sarah, their departed daughter, had unwittingly set in motion a series of events that threatened to change the course of their lives. David, once the most skeptical member of the team, now approached the Quantum Whisperer with a mixture of fear and fascination. There must be a way to understand this entity's motives, he mused, poring over the logs and data. The entity's presence seemed to extend beyond the machine itself. It lingered in the shadows, casting a long and unsettling specter over the laboratory. The air grew colder, and whispers, like distant echoes of despair, filled the room. As night deepened, Amelia's fractured consciousness continued to waver between worlds. She bore witness to the entity's desires, its relentless hunger for life and its unquenchable thirst for existence. She saw the torment of those who had crossed the threshold into the afterlife, an existence defined by yearning and unfulfilled dreams. In the void, the boundary between Amelia's thoughts and the entity's intentions blurred further. She felt herself becoming entwined in a relentless dance with the malevolent force, her existence intertwined with its inscrutable motives. Amelia's thoughts returned to her team and the Mitchell family. She knew that they were grappling with the entity's demands, and a deep sense of foreboding settled in her heart. The entity had cast its shadow over their lives, and the consequences of their decisions were far from clear. The laboratory remained a battleground between science and the supernatural, where the Quantum Whisperer, born of scientific curiosity, had become a conduit to the unknown. The entity's malevolence, now fully realized, had left a haunting mark on all who dared to explore the boundaries of life and death. The team was left with an unsettling choice: to confront the relentless force that had invaded their world or to succumb to a fate defined by the insatiable hunger for existence that lingered in the shadows of the Quantum Whisperer. Chapter 5: The Confrontation. The laboratory was veiled in the inky darkness of night, the Quantum Whisperer standing as a silent sentinel of the unknown. The room's atmosphere was laden with a palpable tension, and the absence of Amelia continued to cast a long, disquieting shadow over the team. Amelia's consciousness remained inextricably linked with the malevolent entity, trapped within the enigmatic void between dimensions. Here, the boundaries of time and reality blurred, and she was locked in an unsettling communion with a force that defied the laws of life and death. The entity's voice echoed once more, its tone an unnerving blend of anguish and longing. "I was robbed of life, and I have hungered for an eternity. You must understand the weight of my torment." Amelia, her own thoughts and emotions entangled with the entity's, struggled to grasp the depths of its suffering. She had become a witness to the entity's insatiable yearning for existence, a yearning that had grown more powerful and malevolent over time. Back in the laboratory, the team grappled with the Quantum Whisperer's eerie silence. It stood as a symbol of their ambition, now eclipsed by the shadow of an uninvited guest from the other side. The entity had brought with it a spectral malevolence that transcended the realm of the living. David, the once skeptical team member, continued to analyze the machine's logs. "We have to confront this entity," he declared, his voice resolute. "It won't stop until it achieves its goal." The Mitchell family, who had initially sought solace in the Quantum Whisperer, now shared a sense of dread with the team. Their quest to reach their departed daughter had unwittingly led them into a nightmarish world of the unknown. The room grew colder, the air heavy with an unseen presence. It was as though the entity's power extended beyond the confines of the machine, casting a chilling grip on those who dared to stand against it. Whispers, like distant echoes of despair, swirled through the room. As the hours passed, a decision took shape among the team. The entity's demands had to be confronted, but it was a dangerous path. A controlled session with the Quantum Whisperer was the only way to engage with the entity directly. With a sense of trepidation, the team initiated the session. The Quantum Whisperer, its screens aglow once more, crackled to life. The room descended into an eerie silence, the team members exchanging uneasy glances as they waited for the entity to manifest. Amelia, locked in the enigmatic void, felt the connection between her consciousness and the entity strengthen. She was both a scientist and a spectral entity, intertwined in a perilous dance. The malevolent presence loomed on the periphery, its form shifting and elusive. As the session progressed, the entity's presence grew more tangible. The room seemed to quiver with energy, the temperature dropping to an icy chill. The Quantum Whisperer's lights flickered erratically, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The entity's voice, a dissonant chorus of the forgotten and the forsaken, whispered in the air. "I am here," it hissed, the words carrying a sense of ominous finality. The room descended into chaos. Shadows danced on the walls, contorting into grotesque forms. The entity's power became overwhelming, its malevolence seeping into the very fabric of reality. The team fought to maintain control, their attempts to engage with the entity proving futile. Amelia, in the enigmatic void, sensed the turbulence in the laboratory. Her consciousness wavered as she bore witness to the tumultuous events unfolding on both sides of the dimensional rift. The malevolent entity had refused to be bound by the confines of science, and its relentless pursuit threatened to engulf them all. In the heart of the laboratory, the Quantum Whisperer had become a conduit for a malevolent force that defied the laws of the living. It was a battle between science and the supernatural, a confrontation that had thrust the team and the Mitchell family into a realm of uncertainty and dread. As the session spiraled into chaos, the boundaries between the living and the afterlife blurred, and the room was engulfed by a malevolent force that sought to breach the gap between life and death. The Quantum Whisperer had become a portal to the unknown, and the consequences of their actions were far from clear. Amelia, locked in the enigmatic void, found herself at the center of a relentless dance with the malevolent entity, her existence entangled with its inscrutable motives. The boundaries of life and death had become fluid, and the entity's power extended beyond the confines of the Quantum Whisperer, casting a shadow over all who dared to confront it. Chapter 6: The Price Paid. The laboratory, once a haven of scientific exploration, had transformed into a battleground between the living and the supernatural. The Quantum Whisperer, the pinnacle of scientific achievement, had unwittingly become a conduit for a relentless malevolent force. As the room descended into chaos, shadows danced on the walls, and the entity's presence became inescapable. Amelia, locked in the enigmatic void, was a silent observer of the turmoil. Her consciousness fluctuated between the worlds, her identity blurred by the unending dance with the malevolent entity. The boundaries between life and death seemed tenuous, and she felt herself being drawn into a nightmarish abyss. Back in the laboratory, the team struggled to regain control of the situation. The Quantum Whisperer's lights flickered wildly, casting eerie glows on their faces. David and the others attempted to power down the machine, but their efforts were in vain. The entity had taken hold of it, and the room quivered with its power. The Mitchell family, terrified and powerless, huddled together. They had sought solace in the Quantum Whisperer, but the device had brought them face to face with a malevolent force that transcended the realm of the living. As the tumultuous session continued, the entity's whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices overlapping in an eerie chorus. "I have been robbed of my existence, and I demand my rightful place among the living." The team realized that the entity had refused to be confined to the afterlife. Its relentless pursuit was not a mere desire for communication but a demand for a return to life, regardless of the consequences. The boundaries between the living and the dead had been shattered, and they now faced an entity that sought to bridge the gap by any means necessary. Amelia, in the enigmatic void, felt a growing despair. She saw the turmoil in the laboratory, the struggle to confront an entity that defied the laws of science and nature. The malevolent presence remained elusive, its form shifting and inscrutable, a testament to its otherworldly nature. In the laboratory, David made a difficult decision. "We need to end this session," he declared, his voice trembling. "We can't allow the entity to have unrestricted access to our world." With great effort, the team severed the connection to the Quantum Whisperer. The room fell into an eerie silence as the entity's presence dissipated, and the malevolent force was temporarily confined. The machine's screens went dark, and the atmosphere, while still charged with uncertainty, began to stabilize. Amelia, in the enigmatic void, sensed the session's conclusion. The turmoil in her consciousness gradually subsided, and she felt the rift between the worlds closing. She was left in a state of disarray, her identity fragmented by the relentless dance with the entity. The team regrouped, their faces marked by a mixture of relief and trepidation. The Mitchell family clung to each other, their vulnerability and fear uniting them. Their quest to reach their departed daughter had led them into a realm of the unknown, and the consequences of their actions weighed heavily on their hearts. As the laboratory remained bathed in the unsettling stillness of the aftermath, the team was faced with a sobering reality. The malevolent entity, while temporarily contained, remained a formidable and relentless adversary. The boundaries between the living and the afterlife had been blurred, and the consequences of their actions were far from clear. In the enigmatic void, Amelia's consciousness wavered. She felt herself being pulled in multiple directions, her existence fragmented by the malevolent entity's power. The relentless dance with the force that defied life and death had left an indelible mark on her, and the boundaries of her own identity had become blurred. The laboratory, once a place of scientific exploration and discovery, had been transformed into a battleground between science and the supernatural. The Quantum Whisperer, a symbol of human ambition, had unwittingly become a gateway to the unknown, and the team was left with a haunting question: how to confront a relentless force that defied the boundaries of life and death. Chapter 7: The Unraveling. The laboratory, shrouded in the aftermath of the tumultuous session, lay in an eerie stillness. The Quantum Whisperer, once a beacon of scientific ambition, remained dormant, its screens dark, a stark contrast to the chaos it had unleashed. The team, the Mitchell family, and David, who had once been the most skeptical of the group, gathered in the dimly lit room, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and determination. David, whose doubts about the Quantum Whisperer had been transformed into a grim certainty of the entity's malevolence, addressed the team with a solemn resolve. "We cannot allow this entity to have unrestricted access to our world. We need to understand its nature and its demands, but we must do so cautiously." The team agreed, recognizing that they were dealing with a force that transcended the boundaries of science and nature. Their decision was not without trepidation, but the alternative, a relentless entity with an insatiable hunger for existence, was far more ominous. The Mitchell family, their faces drawn with exhaustion and fear, understood the gravity of the situation. Their desire to connect with their departed daughter had led them into a nightmarish realm, and they were determined to confront the entity that had invaded their lives. As they delved into the data and logs from the Quantum Whisperer, they began to piece together the entity's origins and motivations. It had been drawn to the machine by the promise of access to the living world, a chance to bridge the gap between life and death. Its demands were clear: access to the world of the living in exchange for revealing long-buried secrets from the afterlife. The team's discussion of the entity's demands was fraught with unease. They recognized that Amelia's connection with the entity made her a vital link in the chain, and the entity's power extended beyond the confines of the Quantum Whisperer. They were dealing with an adversary that defied the laws of the living, and the consequences of their actions were unpredictable. David, who had once been the most skeptical member of the team, found himself drawn to the quantum whisperer. He had been a voice of caution, but the events of the past days had shifted his perspective. "We have to proceed carefully," he urged. "The entity is powerful and malevolent, and we must be prepared for the challenges it presents." The team began to explore the possibility of a controlled session with the quantum whisperer, a way to engage with the entity directly and gain a deeper understanding of its nature. It was a risky path, but it seemed to be the only way to confront the malevolent force that had invaded their lives. As night descended upon the laboratory, the team made preparations for the session. The quantum whisperer, once a symbol of scientific ambition, was now a conduit to the unknown, a gateway to a realm that defied human understanding. The room was filled with an uneasy anticipation, the air heavy with the presence of the malevolent entity. The session began, and the quantum whisperer's screens flickered to life once more. The room descended into an eerie silence, broken only by the soft hum of the machine. The team members exchanged cautious glances as they waited for the entity to manifest. In the enigmatic void, Amelia remained locked in a relentless dance with the entity. Her consciousness fluctuated between worlds, her identity blurred by the malevolent force's influence. She was both scientist and spectral entity, entangled in a perilous communion. As the session continued, the entity's presence grew more tangible. The room seemed to quiver with energy, and the temperature dropped to an icy chill. The entity's whispers, a chorus of voices echoing in the air, filled the room. "I am here," the entity hissed, its words carrying an ominous weight. The team attempted to engage with the entity, seeking to understand its motivations and demands. They had entered a realm where the boundaries between life and death were blurred, and the consequences of their actions were uncertain. In the enigmatic void, Amelia felt the connection between her consciousness and the entity strengthen. She was both observer and participant in the session, a silent witness to the turbulent events on both sides of the dimensional rift. The malevolent presence remained elusive, its form shifting and inscrutable. The boundaries between the living and the afterlife had become porous, and the team was confronted by a relentless force that defied the laws of science and nature. As the session continued, the team's resolve was tested. The entity's demands remained enigmatic, its motivations unclear. They grappled with the consequences of their actions, knowing that they were dealing with a force that transcended the boundaries of the living. The room seemed to quiver with the entity's power, and the quantum whisperer's lights flickered erratically. The entity's presence, while still elusive, carried an overwhelming malevolence that cast a long shadow over the laboratory. The team's efforts to engage with the entity proved challenging. The entity's demands remained cryptic, and its intentions were shrouded in mystery. They were left with a haunting question: how to confront a relentless force that defied the boundaries of life and death. As the session continued, the boundaries between the living and the afterlife blurred, and the room was engulfed by a malevolent force that sought to bridge the gap between life and death. The quantum whisperer had become a conduit to the unknown, and the consequences of their actions were far from clear. Amelia, in the enigmatic void, remained entangled in a relentless dance with the entity. Her existence had become fragmented, her identity blurred by the malevolent force's influence. The boundaries of life and death had become fluid, and the entity's power extended beyond the confines of the quantum whisperer, casting a shadow over all who dared to confront it. Chapter 8: Bargaining with Shadows. The laboratory, once a realm of scientific inquiry, had been transformed into a battleground between the living and the spectral. The quantum whisperer, once a symbol of human ambition, now stood as an enigmatic gateway to the unknown. In the dimly lit room, the team and the Mitchell family gathered, their expressions a mixture of trepidation and determination. David, who had transitioned from skepticism to a grim recognition of the entity's malevolence, addressed the group with unwavering resolve. "We must confront the entity, but we must do so with great caution. It seeks to bridge the gap between the living and the afterlife, and we must understand its nature and its demands. The team agreed, acknowledging the gravity of their situation. The entity's power extended beyond the quantum whisperer, and the boundaries between the living and the spectral had become porous. Their adversary was relentless and malevolent, defying the laws of the natural world. The Mitchell family, who had embarked on their quest to connect with their departed daughter, understood the magnitude of the challenge. Their desire to reunite with Sarah had unwittingly thrust them into a nightmarish realm, and they were now prepared to confront the entity that had invaded their lives. As they delved into the machine's data and logs, they began to piece together the entity's origins and motives. It had been drawn to the quantum whisperer by the promise of accessing the living world, and its demands were clear: access to the world of the living in exchange for revealing long-buried secrets from the afterlife. David, once a skeptic, found himself drawn to the quantum whisperer. He had been the voice of caution, but the events of the past days had shifted his perspective. "We need to proceed with great care," he urged. "The entity is powerful, and our understanding of its nature is limited. But we must confront it." Preparations for a controlled session with the quantum whisperer were made. The team recognized that engaging directly with the entity was the only way to gain deeper insights into its motives and nature. It was a risky path, but the unknown entity had become a formidable adversary that defied the boundaries of science and nature. The session began, and the quantum whisperer's screens flickered to life. The room descended into an eerie silence, broken only by the soft hum of the machine. The team members exchanged cautious glances, their expressions marked by unease as they waited for the entity to manifest. In the enigmatic void, Amelia remained locked in a relentless dance with the entity. Her consciousness fluctuated between the worlds, her identity blurred by the malevolent force's influence. She had become both observer and participant in the session, a silent witness to the turbulent events on both sides of the dimensional rift. The entity's presence grew more tangible, and the room quivered with its power. The temperature dropped, and the quantum whisperer's lights flickered erratically. The entity's whispers, a dissonant chorus of voices, filled the room. "I am here," the entity hissed, its words carrying an unsettling weight. The team sought to engage with the entity, a perilous endeavor that sought to understand its motivations and demands. The boundaries between the living and the afterlife had become blurred, and they were confronted by a relentless force that defied the laws of science and nature. In the enigmatic void, Amelia felt the connection between her consciousness and the entity strengthen. She was both observer and participant, her existence entangled in a perilous communion with the malevolent force. The boundaries of her identity had become blurred, and the relentless dance with the entity left a profound mark on her. The malevolent presence remained elusive, its form shifting and enigmatic. The boundaries between the living and the afterlife had become porous, and the team was confronting a force that transcended human understanding. As the session continued, the team's resolve was tested. The entity's demands were enigmatic, and its motivations remained shrouded in mystery. They grappled with the consequences of their actions, knowing that they were dealing with a force that defied the boundaries of the living. The room quivered with the entity's power, and the quantum whisperer's lights flickered erratically. The entity's presence was overwhelming, casting a long shadow over the laboratory. The team's efforts to engage with the entity were fraught with challenges. The entity's demands were cryptic, and its intentions remained unclear. They were left with a haunting question: how to confront a relentless force that defied the boundaries of life and death. As the session continued, the boundaries between the living and the afterlife blurred, and the room was engulfed by a malevolent force that sought to bridge the gap between life and death. The quantum whisperer had become a conduit to the unknown, and the consequences of their actions remained uncertain. Amelia, in the enigmatic void, remained entangled in a relentless dance with the entity. Her existence had become fragmented, her identity blurred by the malevolent force's influence. The boundaries of life and death had become porous, and the entity's power extended beyond the confines of the quantum whisperer, casting a shadow over all who dared to confront it. Chapter 9: Echoes of the Unseen. The laboratory, bathed in an eerie stillness, held its breath as the controlled session with the quantum whisperer continued. The room was veiled in the spectral glow of the machine screens, its hum a constant reminder of the enigmatic entity's presence. The team and the Mitchell family, their faces etched with trepidation, were poised on the precipice of the unknown. David, who had transitioned from skepticism to a resolute acknowledgement of the entity's malevolence, spoke with a measured determination. "We are treading on unfamiliar ground. This entity's nature is elusive, and we must proceed cautiously." The team nodded in agreement, fully aware that they were grappling with a force that defied the laws of the living world. The Mitchell family, their initial desire to reunite with their departed daughter overshadowed by the menacing entity, stood resolute in their determination to confront the unknown. As they delved deeper into the data and logs from the quantum whisperer, a clearer picture of the entity's origins and motives began to emerge. It had been drawn to the machine by the allure of accessing the living world, and its demands were uncompromising: access to the realm of the living in exchange for revealing long-buried secrets from the afterlife. David, who had once been the voice of skepticism, found himself drawn to the quantum whisperer. The events of the past days had transformed his perspective, and he recognized the importance of understanding the entity's nature. "We must continue our efforts to engage with the entity, but with great care," he emphasized. The controlled session continued, and the quantum whisperer's screens flickered to life. The room was cast into an eerie silence, marked only by the soft hum of the machine. The team members exchanged cautious glances, their expressions a reflection of the unease that hung heavy in the air. In the enigmatic void, Amelia remained locked in the relentless dance with the entity. Her consciousness continued to waver between worlds, her identity blurred by the malevolent force's influence. She had become both a spectator and a participant in the session, a silent witness to the events on both sides of the dimensional rift. The entity's presence became more tangible, and the room quivered with its power. The temperature dropped, and the quantum whisperer's lights flickered erratically. The entity's whispers, an unsettling chorus of voices, reverberated through the room. "I am here," the entity declared, its voice a dissonant blend of anguish and yearning. The team engaged with the entity, seeking to gain insights into its motivations and demands. The boundaries between the living and the afterlife remained elusive, and they confronted a force that transcended human understanding. In the enigmatic void, Amelia felt the connection between her consciousness and the entity strengthen. Her existence had become entangled in a perilous communion with the malevolent force, and her identity was further blurred. She continued to witness the events on both sides of the rift, her perspective fragmented by the relentless dance. The malevolent presence, ever enigmatic, remained elusive. Its form shifted and changed, defying understanding. The team grappled with the complexities of confronting a force that transcended human understanding. As the session progressed, the team's resolve was tested. The entity's demands were cryptic, and its motives remained shrouded in mystery. They navigated uncharted waters, confronting a relentless force that defied the laws of science and nature. The room quivered with the entity's power, and the quantum whisperer's lights flickered erratically. The presence of the malevolent entity filled the laboratory, casting an inescapable shadow. The team's efforts to engage with the entity were fraught with challenges. The entity's enigmatic demands and cryptic intentions left them with more questions than answers. They were left with the haunting question of how to confront a relentless force that defied the boundaries of life and death. As the session continued, the boundaries between the living and the afterlife remained blurred. The room was immersed in a malevolent force that sought to bridge the gap between life and death. The quantum whisperer had become a portal to the unknown, and the consequences of their actions remained uncertain. Amelia, in the enigmatic void, remained entangled in a relentless dance with the entity. Her existence was fragmented, her identity blurred by the malevolent force's influence. The boundaries of life and death had become porous, and the entity's power extended beyond the confines of the quantum whisperer, casting a shadow over all who dared to confront it. Chapter 10: The Unraveled Secrets. The laboratory, still shrouded in the spectral glow of the quantum whisperer, remained a realm of uncertainty and unease. The controlled session with the enigmatic entity continued, the room echoing with the dissonant voices of the otherworldly force. The team and the Mitchell family, their faces etched with a blend of apprehension and determination, stood on the precipice of understanding the malevolent entity's motives. David, who had transitioned from skepticism to a firm recognition of the entity's malevolence, spoke with a resolve that mirrored the gravity of their situation. Our understanding of this entity is limited, and its motives remain cryptic. We must proceed cautiously as we navigate the unknown. The team nodded in agreement, acutely aware that they were dealing with a force that transcended the boundaries of the living world. The Mitchell family, their initial quest to reconnect with their departed daughter overshadowed by the ominous entity, remained steadfast in their determination to confront the unknown. As they delved deeper into the data and logs from the quantum whisperer, they uncovered fragments of the entity's origins and motives. It had been lured to the machine by the promise of breaching the barrier between the living and the afterlife, and its demands remained unequivocal: access to the realm of the living in exchange for the revelation of long-buried secrets from the afterlife. David, who had once been the voice of skepticism, found himself drawn to the quantum whisperer. The events of the past days had transformed his perspective, and he recognized the importance of unraveling the entity's enigmatic nature. "We must continue our efforts to engage with the entity," he urged, but with great care. The controlled session persisted, and the quantum whisperer's screens flickered to life once more. The room was engulfed in an eerie silence, broken only by the soft hum of the machine. The team members exchanged cautious glances, their expressions a mirror of the apprehension that hung heavy in the air. In the enigmatic void, Amelia remained locked in the relentless dance with the entity. Her consciousness oscillated between worlds, her identity blurred by the malevolent force's influence. She had become both a spectator and a participant in the session, a silent witness to the events transpiring on both sides of the dimensional rift. The entity's presence grew more tangible, and the room quivered with its power. The temperature dropped, and the quantum whisperer's lights flickered erratically. The entity's whispers, a cacophony of voices, reverberated through the room. "I am here," the entity declared, its voice a dissonant blend of anguish and yearning. The team sought to engage with the entity, aiming to glean deeper insights into its motivations and demands. The boundaries between the living and the afterlife remained elusive, and they confronted a force that defied human understanding. In the enigmatic void, Amelia sensed the connection between her consciousness and the entity strengthening. Her existence had become entangled in a perilous communion with the malevolent force, and her identity was further blurred. She continued to bear witness to the events on both sides of the rift, her perspective fragmented by the relentless dance. The malevolent presence, ever enigmatic, remained elusive. Its form shifted and morphed, defying understanding. The team grappled with the complexities of confronting a force that transcended human understanding. As the session unfolded, the team's resolve was tested. The entity's demands were cryptic, and its motives remained shrouded in mystery. They navigated uncharted waters, confronting a relentless force that defied the laws of science and nature. The room quivered with the entity's power, and the quantum whisperer's lights flickered erratically. The presence of the malevolent entity filled the laboratory, casting an inescapable shadow. The team's efforts to engage with the entity were fraught with challenges. The entity's enigmatic demands and cryptic intentions left them with more questions than answers. They were left with the haunting question of how to confront a relentless force that defied the boundaries of life and death. As the session progressed, the boundaries between the living and the afterlife remained blurred. The room was immersed in a malevolent force that sought to bridge the gap between life and death. The Quantum Whisperer had become a portal to the unknown, and the consequences of their actions remained uncertain. Amelia, in the enigmatic void, remained entangled in a relentless dance with the entity. Her existence was fragmented, her identity blurred by the malevolent force's influence. The boundaries of life and death had become porous, and the entity's power extended beyond the confines of the Quantum Whisperer, casting a shadow over all who dared to confront it.